Hello and welcome back. This is Craig Faniani from the Sacramento Jazz Education Foundation, and we're going to continue with our discussion about the circle of fifths. This is part 2. We're going to talk about how to use the darn thing, now that we know how to make it. The first thing we're going to talk about is how the chords are related, because a lot of times, whether you're a songwriter or someone that wants to use the circle to practice scales or whatever it is, maybe chords, it's kind of nice to know what's under the hood sort of idea. So the first thing I want you to look at is hold your circle so that the C is at the top, probably would anyway, and notice that the chords on either side that straddle the C are the 4 chord and the 5 chord for the key of C. So if you're into rock and roll or blues or something like that, or really any kind of music, you're going to use your 1, 4, and 5 chords a lot. And they're all major, and they're all major as the 1, 4, 5s in every key. So the 1, 4, and the 5 chords are sitting right there in front of you. Now what's interesting is that if you go clockwise to the next 3 chords, you're going to find that the next 3 chords are related as well. So let's make them minor for this purpose. All right, so you'll find that the D is the relative minor of the key of F. The A is a relative minor for C, and E is a relative minor for G. So you can use those chords because they're related. Also interesting, I think, is that if you take a look at those 6 chords, you're looking at the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 chords of any key. I think it's important to bring up at this time that I've been using letters and numbers for chords. So I'm hoping everybody's okay with that, because that's kind of the terminology for a jazz situation. But also, many times we use Roman numerals. It's going to be set up like this. The major chords are going to be a uppercase Roman numeral, and the minor chords are going to be lowercase. The diminished will be a lowercase as well. In this particular case, the 1 chord would be C, the 2 is D minor, the 3 is E minor, the 4 is F, the 5 is G, and the 6 is A minor. The only one we're leaving out is the half diminished chord that occurs on the 7th note. All right, now back to our relatives, because all those chords in the key of C are relatives of each other. We were talking about the relative major and minor. Many times composers use the major and the relative minor to create interest in their compositions. You can play a melody over C, like Mary Had a Little Lamb or something, or Twinkle Twinkle, and then you can put an A minor chord underneath that and play the same melody, and it sounds different because it's coming from a minor foundation than a major foundation. And so those chords end up getting used a lot for variation and also to change key, to go to someplace different for a song. So you might be asking, why are they called relatives? It's because they're from the same family of chords. So here's a good way to explain that. So let's take a look at the C scale. We know that the C scale has no sharps or flats. We also know that the key of A, because you know how to use your circle, the key of A has 3 sharps. And then we know that if we add 3 flats to any major scale, it becomes minor. We also know that you can flat the 3rd, 6th, and 7th of a major scale. That makes it minor. Those are kind of redundant because they do the exact same things. Because if you add 3 flats to something, they are going to magically be the 3rd, 6th, and 7th. So all you have to do is add 3 flats to any major scale to get a minor scale. Well, if we start with the A major scale, which has 3 sharps, and then we add 3 flats to those 3 sharps, they just cancel out. So all of a sudden we find out that A minor has the same key signature as C major, okay? And A minor is actually called Aeolian, and C major is actually called Ionian, and those are modes. And there are many other modes that we're going to talk about in one of the next lessons as well. That relative term basically means that the scales have the same notes. They're relatives. All right, so if we have a minor scale, how do you make a minor scale if you wanted to just do that? So if I wanted to take a look at the whole step, half step thing, I would find out it's different now. It's going to be whole, half, whole, half, whole, half, whole, half, whole. That gives you a minor scale every time. So let's hear what a minor scale sounds like. Okay? That is one of the three minor scales. There's also melodic and harmonic. This one's called natural. So natural minor is, that's A to A, all white notes. So that means it's a relative to C major, which is C to C, all white notes. We will find that there is a D to D, all white notes, etc. soon. Now, we've also been talking about chords. So we talked about the 1, the 4, and the 5 chord, and the 2, and the 3, and the 6, and whatnot. So let's see how that works. In order to make a major triad, we use the 1, 3, 5 of the major scale. And that's going to be referred to in a lot of different lessons you're going to see. That's something we're going to use in ear training as well, because I'm going to ask you to sing them, because you got to get them in your mind's ear, in your brain. The minor chord is going to be the 1, 3, 5 of the minor scale. So this, which is A minor, the 1, 3, 5 are here. Reminds me of an old rock and roll song called Inagata Davida. Anyway, was the organ intro. But I digress. Okay, so major scales, minor scales, major chords, minor chords are related. When you make a major or minor chord, you're going to find that they have the same 1 and 5, but the third is the only thing that's going to be changed. Because remember how we said we're going to flat the 3rd, 6th, and 7th of a major scale to make it minor. The only one that's going to be affected when we change the triad from major to minor is the 3rd, because we're not playing the 6th and 7th on a major triad and minor triad. All right, let's do something a little different. In the first lesson, I alluded to the fact that sometimes we don't call the circle of fifths. Sometimes we call it the circle of fourths. Sometimes it's just called the cycle. Well, I've been using the circle as a circle of fourths for practically my whole life, and I'm going to show you why. So what that simply means is you just take the circle of fifths and flip it over. So instead of clockwise going up fifths, it's going to go up fourths. Why would I do that? Well, let's take a look. Since I'm a piano teacher, I'm really interested in figuring out the best way to look at chord progressions and see how they work, see how they progress. That's why they're called a progression, I guess. And if you look at the way roots move in many, 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 many songs, you're going to see them progressing the same way you have them if you're doing the circle of fourths. There is a high school where I used to teach, and one of the things that we did was we just used the circle of fourths because that's the way chords and melodies actually sound better moving. So you will find, for instance, there's a famous chord progression called the 2-5-1. Well, 2-5-1 in C would be D minor, G, and C. And if you look at your circle, you're going to see that D, G, and C are right together. They work together. It's a little package of chords. I guess what also happens too is C, for instance, is 5 of F. Well, C makes you want to hear F. Hear it want to go to F, and F7 makes you want to hear B flat. So that's the way chords work. So it's kind of fun to string the chords out and use those as kind of a practice tool, I guess. So many uses. So the circle can tell you key signatures, relatives, sequence of sharps and flats, modes, chord progressions, intervals, and more, like transposition of instruments, which I'll probably go into in a different lesson. So keep it handy. I think you'll be glad you did. So stay tuned, and this is Craig Faniani for the Sacramento Jazz Education Foundation, signing off. Thank you very much for listening.